Capitalism is making air travel less and less safe. I don't say that lightly because air travel has tended to get safer over the decades under private ownership as technology has improved uh, and costs have cheapened. But because capitalism is unsustainable, that trend is now really starting to go into reverse. And the worrying thing is that we are going to see more planes crashing and falling from the sky as capitalism continues to decay and collapse. This concern is made plain by this story reported in The Guardian. Europe's air safety at risk amid cost cutting and staff pressures, study warns. Researchers find profit chasing has systematically weakened safety and workers feel unable to challenge decisions. I'm just going to read through it. Pilots and cabin crew at European airlines feel increasingly under pressure to work long hours and hide signs of tiredness at the expense of safety. Cost cutting and profit chasing at airlines has systematically weakened safety, and many exhausted employees feel too intimidated to challenge management decisions, the research by Ghent University in Belgium found. The study, which involved 7,000 workers, also found concerns among cabin crew who reported feeling pushed into making onboard sales of perfumes and alcohol, presenting a conflict with their role in keeping passengers safe and well. Researchers said that a generation of senior pilots had left the industry, replaced by younger, cheaper, and more flexible workers who were more likely to accept precarious contracts that weaken their ability to uphold standards. And that's not to blame from my perspective. The younger generation of pilots who are coming into the industry and taking over from the previous generation, they are entering an economic system in much worse condition than the previous generation, and they're being forced to accept lower wages because they got to work to pay the bills and put food on the table. And this is the position that they're being put in by capitalism, by the actual system of capitalism itself, not just by their specific employer. Asked about whether they felt confident in pushing back against decisions that felt potentially unsafe, more than half of respondents to the survey said they did not feel able to modify instructions from management based on safety objections. The results showed a deterioration since a 2014 study, also by Ghent University, which found 82% of pilots said they did feel able to modify instructions. About 30% of pilots said they were sometimes reluctant to take safety decisions out of fear of possible negative consequences for their professional career. Participants in the study talked of a Swiss cheese model, with safety layers being systematically weakened, poking extra holes for financial reasons, leaving the final barrier to accidents dependent on chance and luck rather than robust protection. Crew are under pressure to work longer shifts with fewer opportunities to rest. As a result, 42% of all crew say management prioritizes scheduling over safety. Fatigue is a persistent problem, with staff often feeling they cannot ask for rest, even when they are tired or unwell. Nearly 1 in 3 pilots and almost half of cabin crew admitted they sometimes hesitate to declare themselves unfit to fly. One said, "I feel like a criminal just for being sick." Another reported their European base manager shouting, "You're here to fucking sell." Others complained of not feeling valued. One said, "Their airline treats me as a number and nothing else. There is no regard for mental well-being or physical well-being. It prides itself on profit over human well-being. It has a poor, toxic workplace culture and a culture of fear. This fear originates from the amount of people they sack for stupid reasons." Asked about their health and whether they felt airlines cared about their personal goals and well-being, 68% of all crew fell below the positive threshold for mental health, while 78% considered themselves dehumanized. The research found atypical employment, such as short-term or self-employed contracts or agency work, as opposed to direct employment by the airline, was a concern because those groups reported worse conditions and lower levels of well-being. The researchers said, without fair and stable employment, we cannot sustain a safe and resilient European aviation sector. Ignacio Plaza, the Secretary General of the European Cockpit Association, the umbrella group for pilot unions, warned, the race to the bottom on contracts now touches every pilot, and when pilots are under pressure, passengers feel the risk too. These abuses demand urgent investigation. A few months ago, it was also reported that Americans' confidence in air travel has fallen after a string of plane crashes. The survey indicated that 64% of Americans believe flying is safe, down from 71% in 2024. It also found that 2 in 10 Americans believe planes are very or somewhat unsafe, a 12% increase in 2024. In 2024, the APNORC poll reported that 45% of Americans indicated they had a great deal of confidence in pilots and 20% in federal government agencies. That's now down to 41% and 13% respectively. Public confidence in air traffic controllers also down from 40% to 35%. There were a series of aviation collisions at the start of 2025. On the 30th of January, an American Airlines plane collided with an Army helicopter above the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., killing all 67 people on both the plane and helicopter. The day after the Washington, D.C. collision, a medical transport jet carrying a child patient, her mother, and 4 other people crashed into a northeast Philadelphia neighborhood, killing 7 people. Several homes were engulfed in flames as a result of the crash. On the 6th of February, a small commuter plane carrying 10 people across Alaska's Norton Sound crashed in the western part of the state, killing all 10 people on board. A Delta Airlines jet carrying 80 passengers and crew crash-landed at Toronto Pearson Airport and flipped over. 21 people were transported to the hospital following the crash. As a result, there's been a spike in Google searches for "Is it safe to fly?" according to multiple reports, as well as how many plane crashes in 2025 and why are planes crashing. Back on the 14th of February, the Trump administration said Happy Valentine's Day by firing hundreds of employees at the Federal Aviation Administration, including some who maintain critical air traffic control infrastructure. According to the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists Union, several hundred workers received termination notices that day. They did not include air traffic controllers, but the union said positions terminated included maintenance mechanics, aeronautical information specialists, environmental protection specialists, aviation safety assistants, and management administration personnel. So, as I said, I don't say this lightly, but it does look like air travel safety is becoming less and less safe. And this is happening because of the decaying nature of capitalism. As I've shown in my other videos, the rate of profit, the general rate of profit, tends to fall historically ever closer to zero because of advancing technology, advancing innovation. The more commodities we make in less time as a result of technology and automation means that commodities are devalued, which means there tends to be less and less profit per commodity. And so capitalism and privately owned production is historically unsustainable. And in the attempts to sustain it, which become more and more desperate. The system becomes more and more dysfunctional and crisis prone. This means it was becoming harder and harder for private industry, private companies to maintain profitability. And so one of the things they do is cut corners, cut costs to improve the bottom line because they want investment to keep coming into the company, of course, and investors are only going to invest if profitability is high enough. If profitability is not high enough, then investment is quite obviously disincentivized. And of course, another way of trying to improve profitability is to cram in as many flights as possible, which means pilots and crew are probably flying more often with less and less rest in between. And then, of course, another way of improving profitability is to replace the older generations who were on higher pay with younger generations who are willing to accept lower pay because they're just starting their careers and they're more desperate for an income, and so on and so forth. So if you ask me, it's a matter of urgency to get the airline industry under public ownership, take the profit motive out of the equation. But that also means taking the economy that supports the airline industry under public ownership, because of course companies that make planes or make components and parts that go into planes, companies that provide the energy, the oil for planes, all of these companies are also suffering from the same profitability crisis, which means they're going to be doing the same sort of things. Obviously, Boeing has been exposed as having been cutting corners and cutting costs in its production of its planes, which adds to the safety concerns considerably. All these sorts of companies are going to be looking at putting their prices up, which then has a knock-on effect on airline companies, increasing the financial economic pressure on them to carry out all of these procedures that makes flying less and less safe. So we need to nationalize the airline industry as a matter of urgency, take it under public ownership, state ownership, same thing. And we need to do the same for the economy that supports it.